Hello, brothers, and welcome to Heroic Stories. It's a series to strengthen Catholic men with real stories of heroic grit and faith, and it's brought to you from heroicmen.org. I'm your host, Dominic from Heroic Men. Each week, I sit down with a guest to ask them how they made it through their darkest moments, who their heroes were, and who they want to be a hero for. These are real men who've battled doubt, they've sought purpose, and they've changed their lives in ways that can inspire you and me to do the same. These are the stories that remind us that heroism isn't born, it's made.
Well, first and foremost, wonderful opportunity to get to sit and chat with you. Always an edifying conversation, no doubt.
Hope so.
Yes, definitely. So we obviously work together at Heroic Men, and so we use the word hero probably, quite a bit more than the average.
Way more than is reasonably expected by ordinary human beings.
Right, exactly. So I'd love to hear kind of what is heroism to you, whether you want to just throw a definition out or even, a story or a character that strikes you in this moment as someone particularly heroic or particularly inspiring. Who would you point to?
That's a great question. We've got a bunch of working definitions among the team that we're trying to figure out which is the one that we like best. And I know that there is one working definition, which is heroism is showing up and doing the job that you agreed to do, no matter what. I think that's actually really, really valuable because a lot of us flake when things get really hard, especially when we get into the dark night of the soul situation and we don't understand, why should I continue? Nobody cares. Nobody even knows. If I walk away, it won't make a difference. I think that is easily one definition of heroism, is keeping going, stepping up. I think for me, heroism is a pretty distinct thing. And it's more than just doing your job without praise. It seems to me that's like a baseline for, well, really any adult, definitely for, an ideal for manhood is something like that. But heroism would be probably taking on a bigger cross than people would expect you to carry. Not out of ego, not because, well, hey, that one looks bigger and I've got the muscles for it, but more like maybe my life would expect me to carry this kind of a challenge or this kind of a cross or be this kind of a person, but there's a need for an insane amount of good, and it's very hard to do, and I don't see anybody else doing it. And I can't imagine going through life having done nothing. And so that kind of heroism is one that really speaks to me. So to bridge that over to your second question about like, who's a figure that, I saw Hacksaw Ridge this past year and I'd never seen it before. Now all of a sudden I love, and I forgot the actor's name. I can't remember his name. Anyhow, I love him as an actor, the guy from Hacksaw Ridge. I might not totally agree with like his, conscientious objection towards warfare. I think that there definitely is a time and a place for active military combat and stuff. But his conviction, and then the fact that people respected that, but mostly the whole final scene of that movie where he's like, everybody would be honorable to walk away now from this bloodbath. But I found a thin chance to do something that everybody else would not do, but I could not go back home knowing I did nothing. I can't be that person. And so just his whole, again, it's been a year since I've seen it. So the feeling of that movie has now like seeped into my bones, but where he's like, okay, just one more. And then he'd roll back over and crawl back through the mud, grab one more guy out of a foxhole or something and pull him back to the cliff and then lower him down. He seems like such a nice, soft guy, but the grit, the insane grit inside him. There's this, I've not seen this movie, but this line keeps coming back up, which is, sometimes you just need 20 seconds of insane courage, 20 seconds of unbelievable courage, and it will absolutely change your life. And I think he's somebody who did that. And he ended up challenging almost everybody in his life. And at the end, he just made a decision, okay, I can take the next 20 seconds and do something utterly ridiculous and save one guy, and then get through that and realize I could do one more, just one more. So for me, I think I want to be that kind of person. When everything is crazy and I don't know what is the next right thing, or nobody's there to tell me what the next right thing is, I'm going to make up what the best I can do and then see it through as far as I can. And then when it gets really dark, like just go one more step or just do, just one more. That's what
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I think there's so much there. We could probably spend the whole this whole
Let's do it.
hour easily,
Let's go.
right? Just unpacking that. But let me start with, I think you kind of, on both aspects of the question, you touched on something that I think is really central, and that is, that idea of need. What needs to be happening right now, whether or not somebody's doing it. What is the right thing no matter what, that's going on right now. And I've even heard people say, and I couldn't tell you where off the top of my head, but like, why was Martin Luther King Jr. such a hero? Well, because we needed a Martin Luther King Jr. Why were any of these people such heroes? Because we needed a hero, and they're the one who stepped up and said, yeah, even though this is ridiculous, or even though this seems impossible, or even though ... and then they did something. So I'm curious, in your own life, where have you seen those moments of clear need, that maybe have been opportunities or calls to be heroic? Because, hey, something's got to be done here.
Yeah. I think in the moment, heroism never really feels like it. And that's the routine thing we get from everybody we talk to. It's like, I didn't feel heroic in the moment. All I knew was that I couldn't be less than what seemed to be a good man. So now I look back and I've got a bit of distance and time from that, and I can look at that person who I was and maybe be a little more objective and go, for all of my failings and hangups at the time, that was a pretty heroic choice. I'm proud of being that kind of man. I think I want to keep being that kind of man. No guarantee that today I am, but it's about how we're orienting ourselves. So for me, one story that ended up very much defining my life was dating my wife. And there came a point where the family that I was staying with at the time, they all decided that she was breaking up the order of things. So where I come from in the Catholic space, I was part of a sort of a fringe cult-like thing. And for the last 10 years, I've been deconstructing away from that and sort of reconstructing into communion with the church and what that means, how to be a good, faithful Catholic, But I had a lot of stinking thinking that I grew up with. And, well, as it is with any cult, you don't challenge authority. Free thinking is usually a problem. And usually people who are outside of the tribe, outside of the cult, are dangerous, of course, because they're introducing, new things that challenge authority and encourage free thinking. And so she was like that. And I met her on Catholic Match, actually. I was in Australia at the time and flew back to the United States. My family was going through some problems, and so we were kind of bouncing around. I didn't have a fixed place at the time. And I was starting to get some work. And then we started dating, and I would drive up 13 hours to Maryland and say hi to her. And then she drove down 13 hours and she stayed, where I was for a little bit. And so it was how we started getting to know each other. And then came a point where the family decided, no, Dominic is changing. His attitude towards how to be a good Catholic soldier is changing. His relationship to, the appropriate liturgy to attend is changing. This is dangerous stuff because our group relies on him to keep things together. There was a lot of parentification going on. I was in inappropriate roles of authority or, reliance with the team, the community. And so I was out on a holy hour. She was my wife now. We were dating. We went to holy hours almost every day to try to stay sane and have lunch together. And we came home one evening and found all of her stuff in a trash bag outside the door. They would not let her back inside anymore. She was done. You send her back home. And that was the moment. That was the challenge for me, which was, who do I side with? And I didn't know I was going to marry her yet. I liked her a lot. I was beginning to see the idea of a life with her, but that was the cutting off point of, do I stay with everything that I have known, literally my entire identity, frankly, everything that I had, which wasn't much, but I had, or telling her, sorry, this isn't going to work out. Let's break up. You can drive 13 hours at 9 p.m. or something, or go get your own Airbnb or your own hotel or something. Well, I couldn't do that. So we ended up driving over to the local church, and then she slept in the van, and I went into it was perpetual adoration, so I slept on the tile floor of the chapel. And I didn't really sleep very well. And in the morning, we both looked at each other like blearily, very bad night, thinking about our entire future. And then decided, that's it. I'm not going back home. I'm never going back. So I actually went back home, grabbed my laptop, grabbed my jacket, pair of shoes, and then we got in the car and drove 13 hours, and I never spoke to those people again. And I still haven't. That started a 10-year deconstruction process out of everything.
Yeah.
Now, looking back, it felt absolutely terrifying. I did a whole lot of crying. There's a lot of trauma I was working through, obviously. But now looking back, realizing that was the right decision, absolutely, to make for my personal self, for my faith life, for the woman who's now my wife. It was absolutely a decision that needed to be made. And it was probably the hardest thing I ever did. I'm kind of grateful I didn't overthink it. Just felt like this is the only right thing to do. Go. Because I was very scrupulous, still struggle with it. And if I stop and think for too long over, okay, I know this is the right thing, but under what mode should I approach doing this? And then I get stuck and get lost. Sure. So for me, it's like, this is the right thing. I've done my thinking. Do it. And then live with the consequences as best as, So there's a bunch.
So what do you think, you mentioned, people noticing you're changing over time. I mean, do you have any sense looking back what had been happening within you, or like you said, that kind of man, right? I mean, when that moment came, it sounds like there really wasn't a lot of doubt, right? In that moment, you just knew this is the kind of person that I want to be. And I think, it's not everybody gets a moment quite that intense as you have, right? But I think we all want to believe that if push comes to shove and we're really in a jam, that the certain part of ourselves is going to win out, however that shows up in our imagination. But you kind of lived through one of those moments. Like you said, your entire identity, your past, your foundation, all of this is on one side of the scales, and they drew a very, very clear line for you, right? What was happening that led you to become the kind of person for whom that would be the obvious thing to do?
What a great question. So in trying to answer this, here's what I want to avoid is, how do I say, over-profiling a specific group within the church. Because these are the kinds of things that I think a lot of men or people will deal with no matter what religion they're in. It can be a family structure, it can be a business, it can be professional relationships. So these are things that apply all over the place. So it's immaterial for this story, what the actual group was and what the beliefs were and stuff. But those key ideas of being like a Catholic soldier and fighting everything was pretty central. We had a very elitist mindset. And I think what changed me, it had taken a couple of years. What had started changing me was actually going to college for 1 year. And some of the best advice I'd gotten going to college was, don't fight anybody, don't argue with anybody, and just make friends. And okay. And so I would rankle a lot. Look how imperfect everybody is. And obviously look how, not matching up to my level of excellence and stuff. I stank with ego. But I presented very well, or at least I thought I did. And actually meeting other people like my age roughly or younger, and who were good people. Now, I'd always kind of intuited that. I'd never actually been so completely away from the tribal mindset, and actually just having to sit with other people and not argue with them. And so that would mean I wouldn't have a rejoinder half the time, because I couldn't say, well, here's the right thing in this situation. Now, I still failed a lot and I made a bunch of enemies, but I ended up making a bunch of really wonderful friends as well, mostly where I could hold my mouth. And so I learned to start being a better human being, I think. And so I loved that 1 year in college and loved the people that I met. So it taught me about how to be a better human being. And then right before I met my wife, I'd gone back to, well, I say gone back to, I grew up in Australia as a kid for about 9 years, and then we moved to the States. And then I went back to work in Sydney for about 6 months or so. And that's where I was working with a Catholic group. And we spent a lot of time ministering to or witnessing to, Catholic apologetics and creating media and driving it out to parishes and stocking, vestibules and hosting events and so on. And once again, it was not appropriate, or I couldn't bring up all of my convictions that I thought were true about, the popes are horrible people and Catholicism has lost its way and I am the, part of a tradition that's trying to save the church and stuff. And I couldn't talk about that stuff with anybody. So I had to learn to kind of guard my tongue and talk more attentively with other people. And now I had to do it professionally. It was like my job was on the line. So I took it very seriously.
Right.
And then to come back to America and to have met, my wife online, she was absolutely not within this sort of tribal thing. And so it's kind of like bits of this wall that's being chipped away. And frankly, I was having to get more in touch with what it means to try to, or to want to be a good human being before I go on to do or be anything else. As an aside, this is one reason why I love Heroic Men, because there's this challenge in there. Yes, we want to be missionary disciples for Jesus Christ. But even before you get to that level, it's like, do you even know how to be a man at all? And then to be a man who tries to excel at being a man, and then puts all of that skill building at the service of our Lord Commander, Christ. Anyhow, side quest, but I like that flow of thought. I was having to try to learn that myself. And then we ended up going and getting married and having absolutely no family support because I basically betrayed them all on both sides. And so we've done a lot of very lonely family building for the last, 10 years or so.
I like that image of, like you said, these different experiences sort of slowly chipping away at your assumptions. And I think it's so valuable what you said, prohibition against arguing. I wish I have written it down. I am going to challenge myself to that because I love a good debate, but I don't know how much good they ever do, right? Other than making me feel good at a, beautiful bit of reasoning or whatever I think has happened.
Yeah. There's a line from season 1 of Reacher made by Prime. And he goes to this tiny town. He starts getting involved in solving problems. And at one point he goes and he challenges one of the main characters, like, hey, why? I didn't know this about you. Why didn't you tell me that this was actually true about you? And the guy looks at him and goes, I made it a habit of not correcting people. And so I would add on to that, especially if you're not paying me, why would I argue with you? You never actually asked for what I think about something. So just let it go until it's an actual genuine. Now, we're obviously talking in person. It's a bit of a different game when you're online or you're creating content and, basically in a social pulpit. It's a bit of a different situation, different dynamics. In person, I like the idea very much of not arguing. And then when you do, it's very careful and it's very intentional. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and it requires a lot of faith and patience on our part, especially if it's a faith-related topic, right? To trust that, the Holy Spirit's at work and the truth's going to come out, whether that's just someone, okay, I really do want to know what the heck is this all about, or, there's something about the way you live, like, tell me a little bit about that, right? It takes a lot of faith to trust that moment's going to come. And we look at the thief on the cross, right? Sometimes it comes at the very last minute. None of that excusing any kind of sloth on our part, certainly, but, at the same time, you can't,
we can't control the pace of somebody else's journey or somebody else's progress and acceptance of the Holy Spirit. We can't control that.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned, Hacksaw Ridge is as a motivating story right now. Kind of circling back to that question of heroism and heroes. Um, Maybe compare and contrast a little bit for me. Some of your maybe earlier life heroes versus who you look to now.
That's a great question. Um, okay, so in the past as a kid, it was definitely a lot of superheroes. I loved Batman a ton, probably because he was broody and conflicted. Although I grew up with the really really old comics where all the superheroes are laughing and grinning in basically every panel, and then they all lost that sense of joy after the '70s or something. So
Weird.
Phantom, there's a conversation too. So I also grew up with the Phantom in Australia. I don't think Americans know this well beyond that one movie from the late '90s with I forget his name, Slam Evil. Anyhow, so he was a character I grew up with a ton of his comics. I loved the sense of joy that he has as a character, and a figure like Robin Hood has always been one of my defaults. Always very merry and very brave. And actually, I think for the last 10 years, those two ideas have been a source of prayer, asking God, help me to be merry, help me to be brave. Because it's very easy to be brave and dour or grim. And we
Yeah.
get a lot of heroic sort of stories like that. And we get a lot of stories about merry people who are not brave at all. So to be able to put those two together, that's a special presence in the world. To be cheerful in spite of everything, and to be, there's a sense from the Inklings that I get where they were merry and brave, in spite of the horrors that they saw in the Second or the First World War, and then watching the Second World War collapse all around them. There's an excessive spirit of bravery that I think they put into the stories that they told. But at the same time is this constant merriment, this constant cheer to like Sam looking beyond the clouds and seeing the one star that, okay, beyond all this, there is something to hope for if we can just endure long enough, something like that. So, and also Robin Hood's got a cool bow, so that's cool.
Very true.
So now as an adult, he's still archetypal for me, but some of the heroes that I have now are honestly Pope Francis is one, and his ability to challenge the status quo, to sit, to not argue, to practice this virtue of silence when everybody is convinced he's wrong. He just sits and waits them out, and I think that that's an incredible virtue that I do very badly at. So I admire that. Trying to think who else. Honestly, a lot of other characters or people that I admire are literary ones. And maybe, I don't know yet. I'm actually curious what you think. Maybe this is an appropriate thing to do as you grow to be more and more of an adult. You begin to see more and more how human everybody is. And so there's a reason why we abstract into fictional or literary or archetypal characters, because not because they'll never fail, but because they're the thing that we're looking for inside the people we admire, are these enduring symbols or signs or personalities. And first we look at the adults and the people around us, and then we get older and realize I'm actually hunting a deeper figure that is present in them, and I want that figure in me. And then you get to be like even more of an adult and realize, oh, that figure I'm hunting under its various types is the person of Christ. Now, I can honestly say I'm not yet at that point where the mystics and the saints are, where they're like, I see it, I get it. I've been in love with God this whole time. Beauty is ever ancient, ever new. It's like, I want to get to that point. I'm at the point where it's still superheroes for me, literary figures like Hacksaw Ridge, probably because they're still gritty and tangible and personal and still, individual, and the stories are compelling. And so that's what that moves me.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really interesting point about that transition. I think there's really something to that, and the sense in which I think one of the great failures of, the collective imagination of the last however many years has been, we've seen all this darkness and we've taken our eyes down and looked just at the darkness. I mean, there's a whole anti-hero movement, and there's just very mixed cultural perception of heroes in general. Certainly never meet them. But I think, to your point, all the more do we need that idealized figure to remind us of what can be done. And an analogy I heard once that was really good is it's the North Star. Nobody starts following the North Star thinking they are going to get to the North Star, right? Nobody should follow one of these idyllic heroes thinking, I am going to be exactly this person. But it gives us that direction, right? It gives us somewhere to move towards. And I think something you pointed out, and it sounds like has been a through line, is that idea of joy and merriment. I think that is, I got chills when you said that. I think it's so badly needed, right? I guess to circle all the way back, what's the need? I know I still have so many conversations. Certainly this was my mindset growing up, but that idea that Catholicism about just gutting out this miserable state and hoping that we did good enough to make it into heaven. And it's if you really break that down, right? What a twisted game that would be, right? But how often do I approach each day thinking, okay, well, I just got to not screw up. Or if I do screw up, this happened. And I think to tie together that idea of merry and brave with also the kind of person that I am, right? Are professional athletes phenomenal at what they do? Yes, or they wouldn't be professional athletes. Does a phenomenal athlete still have a bad game? Do they miss a shot or, whatever? Yes, they do. Does a not very great athlete every once in a while do something amazing? Absolutely. It's about finding that through line of what's consistent. So I really love that idea of being merry and brave. And I think, again, that's so necessary. One of my favorite scripture passages, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but if you are, I'd love to hear your take on it. It's from one of the Psalms. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but it's the Lord will laugh his enemies to scorn. And, initially I had a certain amount of oh yeah, God's so, big and bad and he can scorn whoever he wants because he's God. But I think God just doesn't care. I think it's laughter because God has this perspective on the world that's so far beyond the things that seem so big to me.
Yeah.
It's Israel's surrounded and God's up there chuckling.
Hold my beer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, hang on. That was a good joke. Give me 1 sec, or to go to the Lord of the Rings, like you said, when the hobbits first get out of the Shire, right? They stop in Crick Hollow. They've been chased by these black riders. Gandalf didn't show up. They have no clue what's going on. And like you said, what do? They take a bath and they start singing bath songs.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just right there with the merriment.
No kidding. I've actually got a post I've been sitting on. I need to publish this, but it's I think it's 10 times or 5 times Jesus roasts people in scripture and how hilarious it is in the Gospels. We can read a lot of the gospel accounts with such piety and such reverence that we forget he's actually dunking on Pharisees a ton and on anybody who's mispresenting the charism of the gospel, what the gospel is, what the presence of God in the world is at all. Anyhow, he's actually a pretty hilarious guy, and we forget that he was very merry and brave himself, in spite of everything he had thrown at him. So, yeah, and there's that scorn. He's laughing them to scorn in the sense that, oh gosh, here's a whole side quest conversation I don't want to get into, but how we articulated things about God in the Old Testament becomes refined and clarified, and there's less, psychological projection happening on, from us and prophets on how we think God operates. So we're trying to take what we're intuiting and put it in human words, but you get into the Gospels and there is some high-key scorn happening from Christ on all of these figures who take themselves with such gravitas, we've got it made and we are the perfect mediators between God and men. And he's like, yeah, hold my beer.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's great. So let me ask, who do you want to be a hero to? Because as you pointed out, nobody feels like they are in the moment. I think most people are, but I think it's a good thing to think about with this conversation. So yeah,
Yeah.
who do you want
Yeah.
to be
This
in
was
your
actually, you inspired me with this question because you asked this at one point. I thought it was such a good one. So obviously there's my family, but if I weren't allowed to play that card, because I don't let other people play that card. So I think a lot of the people that I would like to show up for are who I was when I was younger. So maybe there's a little bit of, trying to rescue my younger self from my inner child here. But I see a lot of young people, and maybe people my age too, who they're very self-motivated. They have a lot of energy. They want to do an insane amount of good in the time that they have, but they don't know how. And there's nobody there to either encourage them or to witness them or to help them see what they're good at and see what they can do and then give them a push in the right direction or give a bit of encouragement. So I want to be that kind of person. And maybe that's the dad calling, the fathering sort of calling in me. I don't have a son. We have one little girl. We may be a one-child family. I don't know. See what God, allows in the future. So maybe there's like an unflexed dad impulse in me that wants to, But I think that's kind of that's a man thing. That's something men are supposed to do. If you cannot be a dad, then you can still father somebody. You can still be a father to others. I think that matters to me. So there's young men, or just other people, girls too, who have a lot of, especially creative interests, creative desires. I firmly believe that people who are creative, who have creative gifts, they've drawn a special card in life. It's both a plus and a negative in that they're more often than not a little more sensitive to life, to the trials of life, to abandonment and pain and stuff like that. But because of that sensitivity, they're also more attuned to deeper things, deeper truths. They're more intuitive. They can intuit things better about how hard and how difficult life can be, but also how bright it can also be. I think that they call for the rest of us to rally around them, to support them, to give them a little more space, give them a little more support, because it's the creative people who dream the future. It's the creative people who see beyond today and tomorrow and see into the next year. They're the ones who create the future we all want to live in. So now I'm probably just projecting because that's what I think about myself. But I look at myself and how I grew up as a kid, and I did not feel like I got a lot of support the way I wanted it. But then I continue. What I do on the side is I host communities for other people because it's a hobby and it's a way to show up to help other people. And I continue to see the same thing. Other young people, especially who feel lost, they feel abandoned, unseen, and like lost kids in Neverland, And hooray, I'm Peter Pan. Not where I'm going with this metaphor. But we can encourage and help train and give them the time to help them. And then maybe I will learn or sort of heal myself by helping others. I think that it's funny. The sorrowful mysteries used to be my jam as a young man. Like, the drama, the grit, the passion of the Christ and that movie. Now that I'm older and I don't know about wiser, but honestly, the joyful mysteries, like they slap. They're the ones that something about them, that sense of having a call to adventure that she has in the very first mystery with the guardian, with Angel Gabriel. The first thing she does, she's like, first thing she does is go and help somebody else in the same situation. Right. And in the process of working through that, learns the experience and the insights on to how to handle it and deal with it herself. And then it's only after the second mystery of the visitation, then do we get the nativity. We don't actually get the call to adventure, the nativity of Christ, and then the visitation. A lot of us think that we have to act that way, like, I've got this wonderful, cool idea, or I'm called to be this amazing person. Let me double down on my life and figure all this out for myself, and then I will ship a perfect product.
Right.
As opposed to, wow, I have this call to something that I want to be. I don't even yet know how to do this or how to level up and skill up on my own. So let me go practice and serve other people and see what I can learn by helping them go through it so that I can learn and then I will be better able to handle my own responses and find my own, next right step. Does that answer your question? I think I got
Yeah,
lost in the
yeah.
weeds.
No, that I think that's beautiful. I mean, I think, it runs so counter to the way that we're taught to think, right? You're supposed to find the right answer and deliver it, and, find the right thing and do it. And understanding that finding is a process and that it starts with service, I think is just it's such a valuable insight. Um, and I also think not only because it's effective, but I think it also saves so much pain and angst, right? I mean, you have eighth graders now getting, mail from colleges, and it's like, what,
Yeah. Right.
you know, um,
Right.
I'm all for planning. I'm a planner, but like that's a bit much, you know. So that this idea that we've got to somehow get it right the first time, like to have that grace to understand, like, no, this is a process. You've got to try it out. You got to do this, and again, you got to get out of your own head. You got to put yourself at the service of somebody else. Um, I've jotted it down like twice in this conversation at least. This idea that the call is bigger than we are. Um, it's something like you said, that's one more step beyond what makes any kind of sense, right? Or one more step beyond what I think I can do. Um, there's that constant invitation, I think, for a little bit more, a little bit higher. That I think I've heard that, across you sharing some of your journey. And I think that that's something that's really, pretty universal. Um, yeah. Any closing thoughts you wanna offer?
Well, I think we can sort of bring it home to what we do with Heroic Men, right? Where after a couple of years now working, with this team, and we're a really small team, and we're biting off this a massive problem to be now. Okay, we're not trying to save and solve the whole problem ourselves. We are showing up to serve and help, and support others, kind of like by pooling resources. But at the same time, I love this project that we're doing with Heroic Men because it's such an ambitious dream. This idea that each one of us across all of our stories have spoken to the loneliness that we've struggled with. And I think for me, my life has it broke in half at that specific moment. And within a couple of years, then we went into the quarantine. And so for me, my wife has been ill and almost bedbound for the last 10 years. So we've a lot of medical procedures and stuff like that. So there's been almost a functional quarantine that I've been in for almost a decade now. And so this spirit of brotherhood, it matters to me more than anything because I'm not able to experience it in person, with my family situation. And so my predecessor at Heroic Men, Chris Lopez, when he was first kind of headhunting me to come and get into this position, he said something that I thought I was not going to be good enough for the job. I wasn't really going to take him up on it. But then he said something where he was like, whether you take this position or not, for your own good, you need to go find some men to talk with. You need that for yourself. Right there, right in the feels. I'd never had somebody just simply look at me and go, for your own good, whether I don't get anything out of this, do this for you. And at that moment I thought, I want the position. I want to work with you. I want to work with a group of men who act and think like this.
Yeah.
So he has moved on and the team has sort of changed. We've had, there's now sort of distilled a core trio of us young bloods who are trying to make sense of all of this. But I think that what we've been challenged to or called to is something that our founders, Chris and Robert Tunmeyer, this idea that men need other men. There are no lone wolves. I think that men will lone wolf for a period, but I think that is only done not safely, but well, because we know there's a point at which we can come back into culture, into communion with others. It's when you stay there and you build a spirituality around complete disconnect from all other human beings, that's where it becomes a problem. So this idea of a lone wolf, there's a point at which it can work, but it's not ultimately how we make it into the pearly gates. It's, the prayer is our Father, not my Father. We get in together. We learn and we grow as a community. So Robert has challenged us, and the different older men and sages and mentors who are part of this team, who are challenging us young men. It's a bit of a Hacksaw Ridge feel that I have when I punch in every day and look at the tasks that we've got, and look at the insane amount of good that we're trying to accomplish. And a lot of times it'll feel like Desmond. Is his name Desmond in Hacksaw Ridge? I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember. That feeling of like, I don't exactly know if what I'm doing is going to help. It feels like the best next thing I can. And so this theme, this feel of like, let's leave no man behind, right? And I'm going to add to that, every man makes it home. Like, I choke up when I see that in these military movies where the team leader goes, doesn't matter how deep behind enemy lines we are, every man makes it home. And even if it comes at personal cost and sacrifice, that's the point. Who doesn't want to be on a team where maybe not everybody knows how good you are under fire, but everybody knows everybody is there for each other. And whether I have to carry you or drag you, you're going to make it back home. I mean, that still chokes me up. And if that is my legacy, like, I want that to be my legacy until I'm older and gray, and maybe I'll reevaluate. But for now, that gets me up in the morning. That lets me sleep at night.
Thanks for joining us on Heroic Stories. If this story connected with you, send it to someone. And if you want to chat with us about anything that we've said, head on over to our community at heroicmen.org. We're here for every man out there who feels they're made for more, has the faith to step up, and doesn't know what to do. Come and share your journey with us. Can I share something about a group of men like you? The Heroic Men app is powered by an alliance of supporters. They step up so that others can access life-changing content and community at no cost. Right now, there's another man out there who needs stories and content like this. Maybe he can't even afford a bus fare to Mass. Maybe it's a teen questioning if he matters at all. And maybe it's a father searching for real brotherhood. Your $5 a month covers his ability to access this content. One more soul reached, one more life changed. $5 a month, that's it. If you can, consider paying it forward today. And if you can't, share Heroic Men with another man. That alone could bring another man back to faith in Jesus Christ. And here's how we give even more back to you. Every donor is welcome to join an exclusive group inside our online community. We want to learn from you and work with you to strengthen men so that no man is left behind. Visit heroicmen.org today to stand with us. Someone paid it forward for you. Now will you do the same?